Hello and welcome to That's So Craven, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. This is Dave and this is After Dark and we're streaming live tonight on both X and YouTube. So welcome to everyone joining us. Make sure you send in your comments and questions and we'll do our best to answer those as we go through the show. Obviously tonight we're going to be looking forwards, not backwards. We'll be looking forwards to Southampton on Saturday and the opportunity that awaits Fulham at St Mary's. First of all, for those of you expecting Mary Southgate tonight, you're going to be very disappointed. She sends her apologies, but unfortunately she can't be here, but she will be back next week. But we've got a great panel for you. And first of all, it's not only After Dark tonight, it's After Mark. And the guy that, valiantly stepped up on Monday to do the podcast with Elton when certain others were too hungover and were missing in action. I'm not going to mention any names, but Mark, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very, very well. Always pleased to be here. 3 for 3, so 3 times in a row. If only we had a striker that was that consistent and showed up every game and banged them in. Imagine where we would be. So there you go. I'm the Fulham Asian, half Eastern European Chris Wood lookalike. So that's what I'm bringing to the table today.
Well, yeah, you are. And you're more regular than any of us now. So as I said, we'll have to rename it After Mark. And we'll just rebrand and, you can run the show. So, we're also joined by the Putney perspective himself. It's Skibby. And I think he might have recovered, at least physically, from last Sunday. But we'll find out. Skibby, how are you?
Yeah, still a bit ropey, if I'm honest, with some... Yeah, it was the only way that I could really deal with a loss of that magnitude was an accidental all-night bender and woke up and went to bed around 7 a.m. So wasn't my finest hour, but also meant that when certain messages were flying around saying, "Can you jump on the podcast?" I was not in a position to say yes. I was fast asleep, but so apologies for that. But yeah.
I'd like to question the use of the word accidental there. Maybe your interpretation of that word is different from mine, but understood.
I'm in my 30s now, Mark. It's always accidental. Not at one point did I think, you know what, this is going to be such a great all-night bender. Let's do it. It was a, whoops, it's daylight outside, and I've just poured myself my last rum, I suppose. So there we go. But hey, you know what? I've recovered just about physically. I don't think I'll ever recover emotionally just because of how dominant we were in that first half. But hey, it's just frustrating to say the least. But as you say, onwards, upwards and forwards.
Well, this is it. And of course, Elton and Mark, we had your expert analysis on Monday's pod, obviously mixed in with your wild theories. But it was a great show. And if you haven't heard it, make sure you go back and listen to it. It was a very cathartic experience. And it, cheered me up because of the wit that Mark and Elton brought to the podcast. So great show. Well done, guys. And Skibby, I suppose let's touch on Chelsea if we have to. I mean, what the fuck happened in the second half that game last Sunday?
It was pretty obvious to me, and unfortunately, it wasn't obvious to Marco at the time. So I think I pinpointed in my own head, I suppose, sitting behind the Hammersmith end, you could see that Reece James was coming in centrally when they didn't have the ball, which meant the left-hand side was completely open. And I think it was Chalobah, who was always had 2-on-1, just because whenever we turn over possession, Robinson or Iwobi would be running at him, and it was just perfect. And I think that's where we saw a lot of the success. We saw Sessegnon get some success because they were always interchanging as well, because I think they were identifying that there was such a load of space down the Chelsea right that, just keep passing it down there, and with Sess coming in as well, offers us a natural left footer, can get the ball in quicker, and that's kind of what happened. We moved the ball into Iwobi, took a decent shot goal, and suddenly we score. Second half, they noticed that. They took off Reece James. They put Gusto on, who is a more natural right back, or defensive right back, I should say. And suddenly they cancelled all the space, and we were suddenly thinking, okay, now we've got to rethink it. And apparently and this is probably going to be no disrespect to Tom, but he's done some great stuff for us. But apparently our answer to that was, let's take off Lukic and let's put on Tom Kearney, who's got no legs in him. So we just got absolutely overrun in midfield, and then it's a really harsh thing to say, but categorically that's where we lost the game. As soon as Kearney came on, didn't have any legs in midfield, and they just run straight through us. And I think, from memory, and I out of absolute protest, I refused to watch the highlights, so I'm only going off of what I remember seeing. But the Pedro Neto goal was straight down the middle. Just nobody touched him. I think Cole Palmer was allowed to run with the ball. And yeah, I think George was exactly the same. Just sort of ran through the middle, got it onto his left foot, found the bottom corner, and you're just thinking, does that happen with Lukic on the pitch? No. And I think looking back onto Marco's comments of, we wanted to protect the ball, we wanted to hold on to the ball, and we wanted to use it more. Going down the middle for me was not the change. For me, if you want to hold the ball and do something with the ball, then Willian was the most obvious person to bring on at that point. He's an intelligent player, probably the most intelligent player ever to play for Fulham. And he's still got a bit of, tricks about him just to be able to hold that ball and run it into intelligent areas and use it better. So, I mean, if you really had to sub Lukic in that situation, then why not bring Willian on for Lukic and move Iwobi into that position? Because at least he can hold the ball up and just have a bit of legs about him. But it's just that point of unfortunately for TC, is just legs aren't there anymore. And as soon as you put him up against the midfield, which is the £1 billion team of Chelsea, of Enzo, Caicedo, and Palmer, you're going to get overrun. And that's exactly what happened, and that's pretty much how we lost the game.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that. Nail on the head. And I think rare admission. It was so obvious that the Kearney sub went wrong. Even there was a rare admission of guilt from Marco. He doesn't normally acknowledge kind of any mistakes, but even he had to say that was an error. I just wanted to point out that Jim's just put something in the chat about, all he can remember is Adama walking around where Chelsea were going forward. And yeah, I think that was very noticeable. But just on the wider topic of Adama, what's happened to this guy? I remember at the beginning of the season, he started to see the season really well. He was, he kind of was a permanent fixture on the right of midfield. And I remember saying to Elton, it was like a new signing. He was creative, he was a threat, and then all of a sudden we ran into that kind of Man City game where he missed those chances. And I don't think he's really recovered from there. And he seems like his form has just got worse and worse, to the point now where he's a bit of a liability when he's on the pitch. So all I can put it down to is a kind of confidence thing after that Man City game. But it's really disappointing, really, how his season has kind of just dropped off a cliff.
Before Mark dissects that, I just want to correct Jim's sentence here, because I was going to say, walking around when Chelsea are going forward, I think when Bournemouth were going forward, when Liverpool were going forward, every other team since Christmas is Adama just walking around. It's just, he's an infuriating bloke. So go on, Mark.
Yeah, no, I just jump in there. It's really funny that Jim put this comment in. I have noticed it as well, but there was a random graphic on Instagram, and I think Adama's in like the top 7 Premier League players who spends his time walking. I forget exactly what it was, but it was low 70%. He just walks. Like, yes, we know the guy can sprint like a beast, but you're absolutely right on the form. The form's dropped off a cliff. He was really exciting against Ipswich, right? We saw it all come together. The attack down the right, the overhit cross, but then it gets headed on, and then he swipes it in from the other wing. Super, super exciting. So I don't know what happened there, because right now we got we basically got a pacey AK-47. Like the product just is not there, and it's very frustrating to watch. And he was such a unique tool for us. That's why we were really excited to have him. We had him for relatively cheap. We know that he's super strong, really, really fast. We're hoping the finishing could be worked on. We thought comboing him with Anderson would unlock so many high presses, or at least put pressure on them to rethink. But you're absolutely right. Very, very right to raise that. It's not really gone well for him. bar like a short stint at the beginning of the season.
He just doesn't run in behind. He's just you watch him and you're thinking, right, we've brought on Adama now. I want him to not go past, I don't know, the probably within 5 yards of the halfway line of the halfway line. I don't want him to come into our half any more than 5 yards, just because he is the outball in my opinion. If Raul was going to come back, or Muniz in that situation, just drop about 10 yards just to try and pick up the pieces, he should be the furthest player up the pitch in my opinion, just because of his lightning pace. And if the ball drops to, like you say, we're under attack, we manage to get the ball back, it drops to Anderson, who's he going to look for? He's going to look for that wing, that diagonal, and Adama's away every time, surely. But I don't actually remember seeing Adama blitz anyone for pace probably since like Old Trafford in the FA Cup, maybe. I think there was some chances there, but he was a bit up for it then, because I think of the whole Martinez chat after he sort of told him to hit the gym. But he was a bit riled up, so I guess it would be the home game and the FA Cup game. But
yeah.
Other than that, he just doesn't seem to. He drops too deep. He then overruns the ball. He gets tackled. Like, he tries to take on like 3 or 4 players. Sometimes it works and it looks fantastic. Most of the time, he just loses the ball, and you're just thinking, what are you doing? Give and go. Just pass it inside. Give it to someone who can distribute and leg it. That's exactly what we want from you. And we just don't see it. It's just so frustrating. Like, and I don't know if it's carrying an injury, or he's lost his place in the team since after a strong start, that his head's dropped a bit. But I mean, is he got last year of his contract? I think he's got to be triggered. So I mean, has he been told that we're looking at other things and his head's just completely dropped? Whereas normally you'd think you'd be trying to play for a contract, or at least put yourself in the shop window that someone's going to pick you up. But he just seems to be absent. It's really strange.
It is. And I think there might be something in that. I remember hearing that, I think it was in January, he was like linked with a move to Turkey. And you don't know what's going on behind the scenes of his agent. Maybe he will be moving on at the end of the season. I mean, go back 6 months to start the season, I was thinking no-brainer, not only triggering the extension of Adama's contract, but actually offering him maybe a 2 to 3 year deal, because he was just playing that well and having that much impact in games. Whereas now, I think the general sentiment amongst the fan base is, do you know what? If we just release him, I don't think anyone's going to be that upset, because he's just not offering what he was then. Now it's just, I think what the other problem he's got is because he's lost his place in the starting 11 too. He should be like the best sub ever because of the attributes that he's got, the pace, the strength, and all of that. But it doesn't really work for him off the bench. I can't remember too many appearances where he's come on and actually made an impact in the game. He seems to be, his best performances tend to come from the start. So it's got to be something around his mentality in starting games and coming on as a sub too. I don't know. It just feels like maybe we're coming towards the end and maybe his head's been turned, but it's just a bizarre drop in form, and it's almost night and day difference. And I think it's an interesting one in relation to this game too, because when you look at our bench for this game, obviously Muniz was out. He probably would have started, I think, but he was out with an injury. So we've now got Vinicius on the bench. ESR being out too meant that we had kind of Kearney, Willian, Vinicius, Adama. And all of a sudden, our bench, doesn't look as strong as it did when we had kind of a hungry Muniz and a hungry Sessegnon coming off it. Now we've got Wilson back. That's a step in the right direction. He's going to add something as he gets match fit, but I don't think our bench is as strong. And I think we saw that on Sunday with the subs. They didn't really have the impact that our subs have been having going back 3 or 4 games ago when it was Sess and Muniz. So I don't know. It's not helping Adama being in this form, and I'd rather actually, let's say it again, a Josh King, someone like that get an opportunity if his head's not in it. I mean, what do you reckon, Mark? Is it time to freshen up some youth?
Yeah, yeah. What I love about our youth is they're so hungry, right? Maybe it's still a little early. They don't have the nous and the experience to come on. I think King could do a job. I think Marshall Gotto's like he's done himself proud every time he stepped on the pitch, and we want a bit of that. We want a bit of that directness and that drive. I wonder, just to play devil's advocate, or put an opinion that's out there a little bit. Has Marco coached Adama to be cautious? Because sometimes that's what I feel like. I've raised this point before, but when Ipswich counter, or when Palace counter, or whoever counters, especially Forest, right, it's full force. Even when Adama was playing well, he would sprint to outside the box, then he'd hold it and look for the cross. So I wonder if Marco has told him, like, stop, think, look for the pass instead of to go full force and, I don't know, do a cutback or just shoot on goal. So that's just food for thought. I think you're right about the bench, though. The bench is a big reason. I think I addressed on the last pod, when they can bring on hundreds of millions of pounds fresh, ready to go, and we have to rely on some of the older players. That's a little bit tricky. But yeah, no, Adama has been pretty disappointing of late.
Yeah. The other thing that I found really strange about Sunday's game is it's almost like a mirror image of the game at Stamford Bridge. It's where, you'd argue that Chelsea started the game the better team, took the leads, and then half-time everything changed. And it's even weird, the goals are almost in the exact same minutes. It's really bizarre coincidence. I'd like to think it shows that there's not much between the two sides. That's the positive I'll take from it. But if there is one. But look, horrible way to lose. And I think we just need to move on from everyone's sanity on this one, because I just, it's certainly one I want to forget. And we've got a big game at this weekend. When you look ahead to the results, that I suppose the fixtures that we've got left, on paper, you'd have to say this should be the biggest opportunity to get 3 points. We'll go in as the favourites. Southampton have been relegated. They've been generally pretty abysmal this year. I'm putting together a lot of reasons why we should win, but it's a big opportunity, and one I think that we'd have to take advantage of to stand any chance of, actually making this 8th place in the league and having an opportunity at Europe. Guys, what do you reckon? I mean, if we can't get 3 points here, it's very difficult to see how we're going to get enough points to even challenge. It'd be a very disappointing result, if anything other than 3 points, I think.
Yeah, I'll hop in. You're absolutely right. Having said that, we have lost to them before. Not lost, sorry, we drew. We couldn't even beat Southampton at home, and that's deeply frustrating. I don't want us just to win. I want us to smash them. This whole season we've said, oh, there's a 5-0 on us. There's a 5. It just needs to click, and then that 5-0 is coming. Why not now? What a great way to bounce if we could recover and just absolutely spread out the goals. One for Wilson, one for Iwobi, one for Muniz, one for Raul. Just blitz them as hard as possible. Get our confidence up before that really tough run, to be honest. No, even this won't be an easy game, but we got Everton, Brentford, Villa, City. Not an easy run-in. Sorry for cutting in there, Skivvy, but your take. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, you're not wrong. And I think it's going to sound really kind of arrogant, but at the same time, you got to look where we are in the league, right? We're currently sitting on 48 points, going for one of our best ever finishes, whereas Southampton are sitting on 11 points. 11 after 33, 34 games, which is atrocious. That's currently on par with the worst ever from a Premier League team with Derby County. So to have that with 4 games left is pretty bad. So for us not to be able to really take Southampton to the sword it's not acceptable, if I'm honest. I think, especially when you're talking like, we've got Everton coming up, which will be a very tough game. Got Man City at home, very tough. Everton, I said that. Aston Villa, extremely tough games. So if we get, like Dave said, if we're going to get anywhere near being in the top 7, or top 8, sorry, then this has to be the first 3 points. This has to be at least the start of anything. If we don't get 3 points here, I would say that's pretty much Europe and top 8 gone, because we can't just keep relying on Brentford, Brighton, and the likes just to keep dropping points with us. It's almost like none of us want that position right now. But hey, it's going to be, the pressure is definitely on Fulham. But obviously the fact that Southampton now have nothing to play for, they can't. I don't think they can even come out of 20th right now because they're just so adrift. That they're going to have zero pressure, playing for the fans, playing for pride at this point, which probably works more in their favour. But I mean, come on, we've got enough quality to sort of about us to sort of at least take them to a good 2 to 3 goal deficit. But it'd be interesting to see how we line up. I mean, I like Mark's analogy that we'll share the goals around, but I mean, Vinicius will be in because I think Muniz is still injured. Unfortunately, I saw the points from the presser earlier. But you know, mine serves me that I think under 21s we were really kind of putting all our eggs in one basket with this whole International Premier League Cup semi-final. So if you saw the team that was put out for that, you know, Josh King was there. I think Godot was there. We really went for that. So it wouldn't surprise me that now, with the under 21s being where they are, we might be able to see Josh King come back in. We might be able to see Godot come back in. And I think, if memory serves me rightly, King actually started this game at home and did very well, really well. So it could be a game for him to come in, freshen it up a little bit. But, you know, I think that would still be pretty harsh on Andreas, given sort of the performance that he's put in the last couple of weeks in that number 10. It's almost like you'll just be putting in King just for the sake of it, which, you know, I'm not all for, and I don't think Marco is either. But for me, Iwobi scored in the last game, and Cess, for me, had a really good game as well. I mean, he wasn't that bad. So I still think he's playing well, and it would rock his confidence a little bit if he gets dropped at the first sign of, you know, didn't really have much of a goal threat, but he did get an assist. So would Godot come in there? Probably not. I think it's definitely one where we put strongest team out and play how we know how we can play, and just really try and take the game to Southampton.
Yeah. No, for sure. And the thing is the interesting thing is we keep getting Southampton when just after they sack their manager. So we've got, what's his name? This assistant that kind of put everyone behind the ball at Craven Cottage. That guy who made it really difficult for us that day. He identified quite clearly that we can struggle at home against a low block. And, you know, he lined up, you know, to basically stop us playing football when they had no real intention of themselves of winning the game, and they got what they came for, you know, on that good day in December, which was obviously a really bad result for us at home. And as Skibby said, now they're relegated, you know, the kind of pressure's off a little bit. They're kind of, I suppose a lot of the players will see it as an opportunity to be in the shop window, you know, if they can perform well in these last few games and, you know, get a goal or put some good performances in, they might get spotted by other Premier League teams and that, you know, that might be interested in buying them. So you can see perhaps they're a wounded animal, and, you know, they'll be up for trying to give their fans something to cheer about because it's been a miserable old season. So it's not an easy game by any means, and we will have to be at our best. I kind of agree with Skibby that I don't see much change in the first 11, especially because Mitrovic. What was I talking about Mitrovic? Muniz is injured. I tell you what I was thinking of Mitrovic is because I remember the last time, and Jim's just mentioned this, where they had their last time they were relegated, we played them and we beat them 2-0. And I think Mitrovic, it was his first game back after the ban, wasn't it? And he scored the second goal. I think it was Vinicius got the first one, if that gives you any confidence for his inclusion on Saturday. But yeah, I think it could be a tough time to play them if we're not at our best. I think, as Skibby said, first 11 is probably there or thereabouts. And actually, maybe the opportunity is for some of the youngsters to take some of the bench positions from players who are underperforming, the likes of Kearney and Adama. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know.
Well, and does Smith Rowe walk straight back in, given he's had a bit of a tough time and he's just come back from injury? That's going to be a strange one. But yeah, it was Simon Rusk. I think he's also caretaker now. Again, but yeah, it's just tough to break them down, isn't it? But I mean, Mark, how are you feeling? Are you optimistic?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be, right? If we're not optimistic about Southampton on possibly a record low points, maybe not. I don't know. They're pretty much bottom anyway, and they're down and out. Then when can you be confident? I actually was hoping that ESR gets a run out, and we've said it before, but he needs to be able to do it against these teams. He needs to. We brought him to be the creative player, the one that can unlock these defenses. God, he's got to do it against a disheartened, demotivated Southampton. Like this is his moment to shine. Just throw him out there for a bit and see what happens. I've fought his corner for so long. I want some fruit out of it, you know. I want to be able to say, look, he's done it again. He's finally scored a goal. But we'll see. I see we brought up the last 5, but interesting. Mixed results.
Yeah, there has been a few mixed results in there. Yeah, it's not that was that in the. Well, I can't remember that loss at their place, but it seems to have escaped my memory. I think it's because we lost. I probably just moved on very quickly from it and put it to bed. But yeah, it does stand out as one I just can't remember that game at all. But I'll take Jack's word for it that happens, and I'll move on again. Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one. But look, we've got to turn up. And as you say on Smith Rowe, I mean, I don't think he'll start. I think he's more likely to be on the bench just because he's been injured. If he does come back in. But yeah, you're right. These are the kind of games where we need him to show up, even if it is in a bit part role, because it would be really encouraging if he could end the season strongly. He's had this massive lull in the middle of the season where everyone's doubting him. And, you know, there's questions now being asked about the money that we spent and, you know, even people saying, should we keep him, which is, you know, crazy that we're here now. And that's what we're talking about. But it would be nice if he could finish the season strong, maybe get a goal or two, and just to give everyone a bit of confidence, you know, that he's got that ability and we might see more of it next season. That's what I'd really like for him in the next 5 games, is to have a few performances and show us what he's made of, so we just don't end the season on such a sour note with him. I think that'd be really important for his Fulham career personally. Yeah, so yeah, look, I mean, what can you say? Southampton got some threats in that team. I know they've got the big 6'8" lad up front who's a bit of a menace, but they've got some good players in midfield, I think, who on their day can cause us problems. And we're just going to have to basically do what we did last time we went there when they were relegated, and that's keep it tight at the back and take our opportunities. And you know, I think if we can come away with this for 3 points, everyone will start, you know, the Europe talk will be back on again, of course, because that's just what we do. But I think it will cheer everyone up. It feels like it's been a tricky period. We've lost 3 of the last 4 games, which doesn't feel particularly good, does it? And it's bizarrely one of the only win in there is against Liverpool. Just a bizarre team we are this year.
For sure. I mean, you talk about the Southampton team. There's actually a player for them that I actually really wanted us to get, which was Ogotchukwu, I want to say his name is, from Chelsea. You know, we were looking for that kind of midfielder that can make things happen. And I know before I mention it, Dave, that you hate, you know, maturing other people's players. Let it be Chelsea's player as well. But the fact that I think in the last game he played against West Ham and scored, he just seems to be an actual decent player in the middle of that park. I mean, I'm not saying that West Ham are any good. I mean, given their recent results, but he is just one of those players that is a bit of a standout for me. I mean, he's only on loan, so he doesn't really give a shit what happens to Southampton, let's be honest. But other than that, you look at that defence of Sadeo, Jack Stevens, Bednarek, who's been there for donkeys, Harwood Bellis. It's just not Premier League quality, if I'm honest. But then, interestingly enough, Walker Peters being the right back that's been heavily tipped to potentially be a successor to Kenny Tete. So, I mean, there are some individuals there, but just not as a team. And I think one of their wingers, I want to say Sulemana. I remember watching the Man United game. Where they were 1-0 up, I think, or something, and this guy was just absolutely a thorn in the Man United defence, just running tricks, always getting to the byline, always beating, I think it was either Dallo or Mazzari, and it was just insane to watch him. And you're thinking, this Southampton team's getting relegated, but they're beating Man United 1-0 and absolutely rinsed them down that left-hand side. And then I think, unfortunately, Amad Diallo scored a hat-trick and sunk 3-1 in the end in 5 minutes. But, there are some individual brilliances. There are some players there that can really turn up. It's just a shame, kind of resonates with me in a way with the Scott Parker season where, you've got all those individuals and they just don't perform as a team. It's just interesting that I think, like you say, the curse of manager getting sacked and the assistant manager, I think, is he back in charge again now?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So it's just an interesting bounce where it's almost like go out, play with freedom, and who gives a shit. It could actually work in their favour with the amount of sort of individuals that they've got. Mark, I don't know if you've got any other Southampton players that you think could do a job against us.
No, I mean, I don't know their team that well. I know Ramsdale has had an interesting season, but he always seems to turn up against us. So let's hope he becomes. I learned this from my Gunners friends, but Hologramsdale. Let's hope that guy shows up, and we get to bang a couple in. But yeah, no, I know I hope we keep the king, but I know Kyle Walker-Peters is linked with us. Sulemana, I've heard that name before as well. But I mean, we should be beating these guys. Like, by and large, our first team is a hell of a lot better. But we're just so consistently inconsistent this season. So we'll see where we end up.
The only other player I think we've not mentioned is that Tyler Dibbling, who, has been a bit of a standout for this year. Obviously a youth player that's broken through, heavily linked with, lots of clubs this forthcoming transfer window. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it looks like his form's tailed off a little bit, and it's probably quite natural of a young player like that to not be consistent throughout the whole of the season, especially in a team that's struggling against relegation. But there's clearly a player in there, isn't there? And we'll have to have our wits about us to make sure that he doesn't cause us problems, particularly on the counter, I think. And yeah, you're right. Walker Peters will be interesting. I find it interesting that he could be a replacement for Kenny Tete, because I think they're very different. I had a little look at Walker Peters' stats. I know I've seen him quite a few times in various teams. I remember Spurs he was at for a little while, and I remember seeing him there. But he's a lot more attacking. That's his kind of. He's a bit more of a Robinson. He's quite an attacking fullback, but his defensive numbers aren't that strong. Whereas when you look at Kenny Tete, his, even just on the eye test, we know that he's one of the best defenders one-on-one in the league. In my opinion, he is the best in the league. So it would be a very kind of different player, different profile. And we'd probably change our system up a little bit to accommodate a player like that. So I think quite an interesting link. I was more encouraged today to hear, as reported, I believe, on the BBC, that Kenny Tete is still in talks, and said both sides were quite, keen to try and do a deal. So I'm not giving up hope. I'm to the end. I'm gonna live in hope that Kenny stays, because I don't want that terrible day to come where he leaves Fulham. He's just been such a brilliant player and certainly been one of my favourites.
Keep that hope, Dave. He's just gone to Ajax to let them know he's re-signed for Fulham. You know, he just wants to shake their hand and say, thanks for the interest, but my heart is with Craven Cottage. That's why he's in Holland.
Yeah. I think on the topic of new contracts, I think it's quite important to sort of think about in terms of, it's easy to say the club aren't offering enough money, or the club aren't doing this, or the club aren't doing that. I think at the end of the day, you've got to remember that, one, I reckon our club is providing competitive salaries, I would say. But at the same time, you've got to remember there's a demon in their ear. And that demon in their ear doesn't get paid as much, really, if the player wants to re-sign with Fulham. That, you know, if you think about, you know, the first things that come to my mind are Kenny Tete. He could potentially sign for a Champions League team. Not like within Spain or England, but potentially, you know, in Dutch league or in France or something along those lines. But, you know, and then their agent's going to see that as a massive payday. Josh King, for example, I know he's got another sort of 15 months or so, but at the same time, his agent's got to be thinking, he's hot property right now. I might, like, you know, he might not fulfill his potential. Therefore, it might not be worth much. But if I cash in now and try and get him a big move when he's 17 and really not ready, it's definitely in the agent's interest to make that happen. And we've seen it all too many times, that just in their ear telling them what's great and what's not going to be. So I think it's quite easy to say that the Khans aren't doing X, the Khans aren't doing Y. But to be honest, if Kenny was to leave for Ajax or Champions League football, who am I to say that, you know, that's the wrong decision, or that's something we just can't compete with? Because realistically, we can't. All we can do is throw money at him. I don't think Ajax can compete financially, given, you know, what they talk about in the Dutch leagues. But it's just a difficult time when you think about, why can't we just do X and why can't we just do Y? It's so complicated, and I really hate agents with a passion.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are two sides to the story. There's the agent in the players' ear, and then there's the club. I mean, there were some reports recently in the week that the club are waiting till the summer to discuss contracts, almost as if to say, kind of figure out, oh, have we got a European campaign coming up, you know, and what, you know, does that make a difference to who we bring in and who we keep? Or maybe it's even they want reassurances that Marco's staying before they, you know, sign some of these players. You know, there's so much that could be going on there, but I don't know. It makes me feel a little bit vulnerable that we've got so many players kind of coming to the end. And it's not just this season. You know, it's players like Muniz, who's got a year left, is on tuppence by Premier League standards, is proven now a Premier League goal scorer. You know, come on, guys, get on with it. Tie him down. You know, there's no reason why he shouldn't be offered a 4 to 5 year contract on comparable wages with players of his age and quality. So there is instances like that where I do look at the club and think, come on, guys, you know, don't let that one slip away, because as you said, Skibby, Muniz is going to have an agent in his ear saying, we can get you more money than what you're on at Fulham, you know, and they're not forthcoming with a contract here. If we don't sort this out soon, all summer, all we're going to be hearing is teams coming in for Muniz because his agent's going to start putting his name out there. And I just don't think that's a great position to be in. So I take your point that it's not all as clear cut as, you know, it's not always on the club, but there are instances like that where I just think we're too slow, and and we need to kind of think further ahead. I think. I don't know, Marcus. You know, there's a few others as well. You know, I think Wilson's contract's up next year. Obviously, AP's contract's up next year, so there's a big question mark over him this summer. There's all the guys this year, like Tete and Raul and Adama. There's TC. It feels like there's quite a lot of uncertainty at the moment as to kind of what our team might look like over the next 18 months.
Yeah, Dave, you're absolutely right, and it really bothers me. I think the cons, yes, we seem to recruit pretty well, and they seem to care sometimes. It's really mixed signals we're getting. But I know that we're being cheap with Muniz. I know that we have whoever is, if it's Macintosh or some bean counter in the finance team. It's like, well, he's on really cheap wages, but he's still got 18 months left, right? So let's just keep him on cheap wages and we can deploy that money elsewhere, right? When what we should be doing is exactly what Palace did with Munoz. He probably came in relatively cheap. He's just re-signed. I don't know, they probably upped his wages a fair bit, and now they have him until 28. But when we did the preview against Palace, I said Eze, Munoz, and forget Mateta probably scared me the most. Obviously, their whole team is pretty well drilled and well oiled, but they identified a key performer who's come in really, really strong, and they said, actually, your value is a little bit higher. You might get poached if you're on 20 or 30 when we actually think you're worth 50 or 60 or 80. So we're going to up the contract and we're going to add another year, and that's going to keep you for another 2 or 3 years. We absolutely should be doing that. And you're right, Wilson, AP, they've demonstrated their worth this season. So their contracts are running out. One more person I'd like to talk about. I'm glad we brought up the contract situation. Reedy. I think that's quite interesting because I think there's a really good fit for him with Scotty P's Burnley. I think that's a move that makes sense for all parties. So I saw that little snippet earlier today. And I was like, well, we want to upgrade from Reedy. Burnley probably want proven Premier League players, ideally on the cheap. Ideally, someone the manager has worked with before and can help them defend. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think it makes sense as well? Do you think it can benefit everyone, or should we be looking at, because I think he's still got a fair chunk left on his deal. I think he's still tied down until 28, I want to say.
Yeah. So I think not winter not the start of the season just gone, the year before, we signed him up to a new 4-year deal, which feels bizarre now in hindsight. I mean, he's got one of the longest contracts left out of the current first team.
Yeah.
So unless someone like Burnley come in with an offer, it's going to be hard to move Reedy on. He's not playing that much. He's not in the shop window. So I think, it makes sense. We've got a big drop off, I think, from when we from Berger and Lukic in that center midfield. We saw it on Sunday, sorry. Kearney is looking like his legs are now catching up with him and doesn't look the player he was last season, the year before. And Reedy, Marker just doesn't seem to trust him since he's been injured. So if they're not going to be challenging the first team, then move them on, because we need to improve in that position. And there should be more competition for Berger and Lukic, I think. So, 100% agree with you. I think a move to Burnley would be a great fit. Jim's just shouted Joa. I know you mentioned this on After Dark last week. There's been even more rumours, Skibby.
There have. If Fulham transfer says that there is a bit of smoke to this fire, then I believe him. But it's going to be really complicated. I mean, what an upgrade it would be though if Reedy went out and we brought Zhao back in. Like, that would be an unbelievable. That's like trading in. No disrespect to Reedy, but that's trading in a Kia for a Lamborghini. That's pretty good upgrade. But I mean, when I say complicated, it looks like he's not part of company's plans. They still owe us money from the 50 odd million that they signed him for. Therefore, you can just write that debt off. So it's almost as if we don't really have to pay anything unless we've already spent the Zhao money, which I don't think we have. But it'll be tough, to be honest. And I think it would probably come down to Europe again, because he's going to have other suitors, right? There's going to be... He could go back to Sporting, like play the Champions League in Sporting. He could go to, I don't know, Italy. I reckon Italy, Serie A is a very physical league. He could fit in... I could see him walking into like that Inter side, AC Milan, anything like that. He could probably walk into those sort of midfields. It's just going to be a very, very tough deal. But again, it's the Khans being sentimental. They love being sentimental in these situations. So as soon as a tried and tested sort of not just their ability, but as soon as their mentality becomes available and they know that they can fit in with the group and they know what they are around like the actual club, then it becomes like a bit of a no-brainer for the Khans, and they do tend to sort of open the checkbook. So, but yeah, it'll be an interesting yet very complicated deal if so.
Yeah, Steve Reynolds just raised the point about the original deal was, I think it was 51 million euros. It's not, so it's a bit lower in pounds, and some of it was add-ons. I think. I don't think it was 51 and 5 add-ons. I don't think
the 51 was up front. I think they've only. I would be very surprised if they've even paid half of that. But I do believe it's something around like the 20 million mark.
See, and that's the thing, and that's what makes me wonder if we do have an advantage. I think there's a couple of facet points to this. I think one is if they owe us money, it's quite an easy deal to do, because we just cancel that debt and take him back. Whereas other clubs would have to find that cash for a 30-year-old player, who's kind of got his limitations, right? I love the guy. I think he's absolutely sensational at what he does, but he won't fit in every team, as we've seen this year at Bayern Munich, right? So it's a big outlay for a team that needs a very specific type of player. And it might give us the advantage there. The thing that I think is a bit more bizarre is, would he want to come back? He spent all this time talking about this move and how it was his dream and wanted to go there. He's gone. It's not quite worked out. Is he ready to just kind of write that dream off and come back to Craven Cottage? It seems a bit strange to me, but it's, I don't know. I mean,
touching on what you said though about, does he fit the squad and does he fit any squad? I think this is a real I told you so moment. When he was talking about going to Bayern Munich, I was saying that how fantastic João is in a team like Fulham, where we're not always on the back foot, but we're strongly on the back foot and we need to win that ball back. And he was an absolute terrier. But as soon as he goes into a possession-hungry Bayern side, I just don't see where his qualities lie, if I'm honest, because he just... How many times are Bayern on less than 70% possession in the Bundesliga, which is not a very competitive league, let's be honest. So it didn't seem like much sense to me. And it just seems to have been proven that way, that they've opted over, I think is Kimmich and another one. I want to say Pavlovic, but something along those lines.
Yeah, Pavlovic. Yeah, you're right.
But more ball playing, more kind of Rolls Royce midfielders rather than your ugly little terrier battler. And I just think, for me, he would fit Fulham straight away. I don't think we'd have to adjust. He wouldn't have to adjust because of just the way that Marco plays. He just has that sitting midfielder who just protects the back four, and it just seems like a no-brainer. I think where it would be tougher is probably for Lukic and Berger, because we saw it time and time again in the season before Palhinha left, which is Lukic went missing. Every time he was paired with Palhinha, he went missing. And it's going to be a real shame because we've now started to see a real quality in Lukic. So to see that diminish just because we want to bring back our sort of star CDM for kind of sentimental purposes. I'm not saying that he can't offer anything for Fulham, but I do think that bringing him back would potentially be harmful to, especially Lukic, and I'm not too sure about Berger, whether he would get lost as well. So that's something for Marco to realise is we've spent 35 million on Berger and Lukic. Neither of those fit the bill now because we've got Palhinha and we're going back to the drawing board to go and getting him another centre mid partner. Could be a point for him to discuss.
No, it's a good point. I think that my personal opinion, actually, in recent times, I think Lukic's best performances this season came earlier in the year when he was playing that number 6, when he was playing 6 and Pereira's in the 8. He was racking up the cards, because he was the real ball winner in there. But I thought he played brilliantly. And then obviously Burge came back into the team and Lukic had the suspension and I think an injury. So he had some time out. So he's only more recently kind of come back into the team in that 8 role. And I don't think he's had as big an impact in that role as he did first half of the season in the six. I've found at times it's been a bit like last year where he's not been in the game as much as I'd have liked. He's not played poorly, but he's just not had the same impact. I've also noticed with Sander Berger that, especially in the last few weeks, he's been brilliant this season. He's been a massive win. He's probably been our best signing of the last transfer window, right? He's been excellent. But I think in the last few weeks, I do think there's been occasions where he's been a bit soft in letting in the counter when the teams have been counterattack on us, and he's not given away that professional foul or made that tackle to kind of stop teams running at us through the middle of the park. Where, like, for example, like McAllister against Liverpool with that first goal they scored, there's no way in hell that João Palhinha lets McAllister run past him like that and get a shot away. It just ain't going to happen, But he would have been taken out at the very least. But knowing João, he probably would have won the ball. So I think that there's an element of that with this, that in recent times we've seen a few occasions like that where we've had teams running at us. Bournemouth's another one where teams have run at us right through the middle of the pitch, and there's been a bit of a João Palhinha shaped hole there. And I wonder if the whole timing of this is kind of playing a part in that rumour. And as I think Jim had said a bit earlier on, it could free up Berger to play the 8, and Lukic to be that squad player. It could work, is what I'm saying. It just probably needs some thought.
I like it. I love it. I mean, the problem for me is the cash. I understand when people say we've evolved and we've managed without him. Absolutely true. We've sold him for a good fee. He isn't getting any younger. I understand all the arguments against. But, I hate to bring it up, but if he was on that pitch against Chelsea, we walk away with at least a point. At least, if not the win. Instead of Kearney, it's worlds apart defensively, right? So and I think he was a true professional. He must have been devastated. He already took the photos the first time round when he went to Bayern, and then we didn't sign the papers, right? But he didn't, unlike a certain other hero of ours, former hero of ours, he didn't down tools. He didn't refuse to train. He was a true professional, and I think that's that's what makes me think this is a relatively good deal, right? I think it comes down to the cash, and who knows what other kind of movement there might be, right? Maybe Berger can fit in. Maybe Lukic goes. We get a random offer from Serie A for his services, right? So there's ways we can make it work, and I trust Marco will make it work, and he is such a massive, clear upgrade defensively over Reedy that I would be more than happy to welcome him back.
But I guess if Lukic becomes the new Reed, on the bench, that's the scenario. But it's whether Lukic will accept that, or whether it's just I just worry that he can't play with Palhinha, so it'd have to be sort of like the direct replacement. But then Marco always kind of prefers Berger in that number 6, which is the awkward thing. So it's a tough one. And I think the financials are going to be 70 to 80% of the problem anyway. So I'm not expecting it to happen straight away.
No. I mean, we are starting to see more transfer links now as it comes to the end of the season. There's obviously been a lot of talk about the right backs, and then as we've discussed, there's some news today that Kenny might actually re-sign, which was great, and I'll hang on to that until the end of the window. But it's quite interesting that transfer talk's heated up. There's obviously kind of discussions with agents, and we're starting to get a feel for kind of areas that the club's looking at. We know that we've got a lot of wingers out of contract or coming off loan, and that's clearly an area I think that we need to improve. And I think it's an area that we don't just need to improve. We need to bring in players that have got more of a goal threat than our current crop, because I think that's been a bit of a big problem for us this year. We don't really have enough goal scorers from the wide areas. Iwobi and Wilson have chipped in, and actually Cess has started to now too. But I do think there's still a gap there that we need to improve on. There was talk in our Discord group today. If you're not a member, sign yourself up because you're going to miss this stuff. But yeah, there was talk in our Discord today about Nelson and, whether apparently Arsenal going to move him on. I'm not convinced with Nelson. I know he's had good moments this year, but I'm worried about his injuries, and I'm also worried about his end product. I just don't think that's what we need. I think we need someone with a bit more end product. I mean, how would you guys feel about us bringing him back?
Go on, Mark.
I'm in agreement, Dave. I think I've said before, if there is a player there, absolutely. You don't stay at Arsenal and stick around and they don't keep believing in you. If there isn't any talent, there clearly is. But we're talking about 2 hamstrings gone. We're talking about a big fee. Maybe it's changed, but I was looking at 25 to 30 million. We can find a good winger for that money. I think is it Chukwueze? Maybe I got the name, but he was meant to be with us in January. It was close, so we're probably going to pay about 25 for that, or maybe we structure it in some way that's advantageous for us. But it's a shame because I understand the link Nelson has with the rest of the ex-Arsenal crew with Iwobi and ESR. But yeah, interesting comment from Steve Reynolds. Yeah, I mean, I wish we did that. I wish we did our business earlier. Jao came in earlier, and that was great because we had him for all of the summer camp, and we had him ready to go on day one instead of this deadline day stuff where sometimes we have a manager say, you know what, we're a little thin. I don't want to let this guy go, and then we miss out on some of our targets, which is apparently what happened in January. But yeah, for me, getting back to the topic at hand, Nelson's a no, which means Forrest will pick him up for 15 and chips, and then he'll score 10.
Yeah, no doubt they'll go after him. Yeah, just on that point, with Steve Reynolds' race, I don't expect us to do anything different. I think it will be more a case of we'll start signing players from the end of July, and we'll still be looking to bring people in on deadline day. I've got no reason to believe it won't be any different to what it has been for the last few seasons. And I think if we get our hopes up that we'll be bringing players in earlier, we're going to be disappointed. I think the best that we could probably hope for is getting a bit of clarity around the contract situation when we get to around June or July. If you're going on holiday, I don't think you need to be glued to X to find out what's going on. I think you'd be you can, wait till you get back at the end of July, and you'll probably then start to see who Fulham get through the door. And obviously, I'd be delighted to be wrong, but I've given up any hope that we're that kind of club that is that proactive in the window. It's. But look, I think it's most important. Go on, Skibby, go on.
You talk about transfers and the new contracts and everything. And I don't know if I'm just being pessimistic here, but I'm really nervous the fact that we've openly kind of said that we're waiting to the end of the season for new contracts. And I think there's a lot of talk, obviously, about Spurs at the moment. There's a lot of talk about their management or their manager situation, and Silva is quite rightly involved in the frame there. But I think ever since we started to falter a little bit and lose our grip on 8th, suddenly things have started to come out that we're delaying things, and we're taking a step and waiting to the summer to make some really key decisions. And what that says to me is a kind of a realist pessimist is I think there's a lot hinging on Europe than we think. And I think that also includes Silva. I think he is definitely going to be focused on the job at hand, and he's focused on getting this team to Europe. But if we don't get Europe, I think a team will come in who can offer him Europe. And I think may not be Spurs, but there are other teams in Europe who will have a look at him and potentially be happy to pay his release clause. But also, there's also things around sort of Muniz and him stemming on whether he wants to sign a new contract, because I think Marco is definitely a big deal for him. And, Andreas Pereira was clearly one of those that Marco brought in and made a big priority and stuck with him when he was potentially not playing his best. And I think even him now sort of and ahhing, and his agents putting things out there with Atletico Madrid and other things. Part of me starting to think that it's really make or break for Fulham if we get Europe or not, because not only will we not be able to progress and potentially bring in transfer targets that we want, because those transfer target lists, they're going to be vastly different if we are in Europe, if we're not in Europe. The new contracts of whether we want to keep, certain players. Do we keep TC if we are in Europe? Potentially not. Do we keep, other players, like Reedy being one of them, is definitely one that we can let go. Can we bring in João Paulinho if we're not in Europe? Probably not. Do we keep Silva? Probably not. And, the more that it ticks on and the more that I start to get in my own head about it, finishing 8th is very, very crucial for our progression, just from where we've got to, because I do feel like if we don't get Europe, we may have a bigger rebuild in summer than we actually think.
Yeah. There's certainly some logic in that, and I think I even extend that to season tickets. I obviously we haven't had our announcement yet about the pricing for season tickets, and I think they're waiting as late as they can to see if Fulham have made Europe or not. Obviously, if we do, they get some extra revenue from gate receipts next season for home games, and that might play a factor in how much they charge season tickets for the Premier League. I'm not too sure. Yeah, I think I think you're right. I think there's a lot of decisions on hold at the club until they know what's happening next year. I don't necessarily think it means Marco leaves. I think that Marco would only leave if someone pays his buyout clause and offers him, a better opportunity than he has at Fulham. I'm not naive enough to think that Spurs are, Spurs, he turned a team like Spurs down, but I'm not convinced they'll pay his buyout when there are other managers on the market that they can pick up for nothing or for a much cheaper price. But I take the point. I think that certainly around squad building, I think you're right. I think that might be playing a big factor, and that might be why everything's kind of on hold. But it just feels like we're leaving ourselves a little bit vulnerable. Yeah, it's an interesting one. God, we're coming out of all the theories today. It's it's been a good one, but it's time to start talking about transfers, I think, now in the summer, because we've got these 4 games or 5 games. After Saturday, we've got Villa, which is going to be a tough game. Everton, which I think it looks as tough a game as we could get at home at the moment. They are exactly the type of team we normally struggle against at home, strong low block, and Moyes has got them really organised. I can think that's going to be if we can win that, I think that'd be a fantastic result against, this new Everton side under Moyes. Brentford, they're going to be gunning for us after the game at Craven Cottage. And then City on the last day, might have something to play for. They might be fighting still to get in those Champions League spots. So as you say, it's and these games are going to come, I reckon, quite thick and fast now. We're talking a month now to the Man City game. And then we really will be in that period of trying to understand how Fulham build for next year and, where all the pieces lie. So, yeah, it's an interesting time. I think we've talked enough about the table. There's been some fantastic questions throughout the show today. It's been great. So, thanks everyone for joining in. I don't think we missed any there. We had a couple in our Discord group. Couple of that I'll just read out now. I think we had one from Jungle Whites, and he said, "When does Carlos get sent off against Southampton?" It's a bit of a prediction game. Well, we know he'll come on as a sub, so it's going to be late in the game. But
72nd minute, I reckon he's going to swing for someone.
After coming on the 71st, right?
Yeah. No, he's 72nd. He swings for the 4th official.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, he's got it in him. He was pretty frustrated last year when he was a bit part player, and he was, as we all know, very lucky to stay on the pitch on a few occasions. Imagine what he's like after missing basically a whole season. He must be fuming. So it's an interesting point in there that he is a bit of a liability. Don't forget it. And then Dazza asked me if I'd be doing the podcast in my boxes if we re-sign Kenny. Well, I actually want us to re-sign Kenny, so I think I'll pop a crown on my head for that one. If we do, I'll go to Burger King, get myself a crown, and celebrate that momentous day if that does occur. But it's just by the way, anyone who's watching live, we do take questions for the pod in advance in the Discord group in the podcast section. So if you join up, you can stick some questions in there throughout the week and we'll pick them up during the pod, or you can just ask them live, like everyone that's on tonight has done and made it such a good show.
Yeah. I was just trying to rack my brain of why I did a podcast in my boxes, and I couldn't remember what it was, but it was Stansfield signing for Birmingham. I said, if Stansfield signs for Birmingham, I'll do it in my boxes. I couldn't believe it when he left for 15 odd million, but to a League One club. But there you go.
Well, what's it going to take for you to get those boxes out on the camera? You know, give the people what they don't want.
If Zhao comes back, there's your next one. If Zhao comes back, then I'll do it.
Make it happen, universe.
I mean, I've got to be careful with some of these. I only just dodged a Willian tattoo by a window. I said if we re-signed Willian in the summer, then I would get a Willian tattoo. And he only signed, I think, it must have been January, so end of the January one. So very, very lucky. Jim asks, is anyone going to Southampton? I'm sadly not. I don't know if Dave is.
No, unfortunately, I'm not. I know Michael, who's been on the pod before, he'll be going, and I'm a bit stuck actually. I haven't got too many games left this year now, just because of various commitments. But I'm sure it'd be a fun day. I know we sold out, so that's always we have a good atmosphere down there. I think we generally tend to sell out at Southampton, so I'm sure it's going to be a great crack down there. And as I just hope it's a good afternoon for everyone. I hope we bring back some points. And actually, I don't really care how we do it. I know Mark wants a 5-0. I'd take a 1-0. I just want 3 points. I think that's the most important thing on Saturday. And I am a little bit nervous. I'm kind of optimistic, but a little nervous just because of our current form and also the fact that Southampton, as we said earlier in the pod, the pressure's off now, and you just don't know what you're going to get. That's kind of the little bit of the overarching fear that I possess. So cool. Okay. Blimey, 1 hour and 7 minutes. Probably time that we shut this thing down and called it a Thursday. But yeah, as I say, thanks Skibby for joining us.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. And I've recovered. I've had me a pint of lemonade, so I feel a lot better.
Good man. And after Mark, good man. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Dave. I did not have a pint of lemonade. I had beer in this, even though it's a mug, but I joined in spirit.
Yeah, that was the thing. We noticed that before the show went live today, that Mark drinks his beer out of a teacup, which is very bizarre. So feel free to offer him some abuse in the comments. Thanks from me to everyone who followed live and all the excellent contributions that came through. As I say, Mary is promised she'll be back next week. So tune in for After Dark next Thursday night, and also tune in after Saturday's game. We'll probably do a pod on Sunday, I'd imagine, to cover the game. And we look forward to discussing that and discussing 3 points for Fulham. So thanks again to everyone, and come on, you Whites.